Okay, we're just getting started here. Just opening my chat window. Okay. So yeah, there were a fair amount of questions about this assignment. I'm going to try to address all of them as I build out a bit of a demo here. I know Tatovic had some questions. I just wanted to ask about those questions. It looks like they were related to this image here, perhaps. I'm just, you can correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm not understanding the question. You said, I didn't quite understand the round magnetic like red lines around the covers. How are they drawn and what do they help with? I'm guessing you meant these red lines drawn on the image from the lecture. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah, generally speaking, they're kind of showing how cover interaction works, like how groups of cover relate to other groups of cover. For instance, some of the lines, like they're drawn, actually these lines are drawn for different reasons. Like obviously lines like this curvilinear one right there are drawn more for showing sort of a defensive line. And I guess that's actually, now that I think of it, that's mostly what they're showing. They're showing you sort of like, this is a defensive line between here and there, between this green piece of cover and that green piece of cover. These two pieces form a defensive cluster. They're almost like what sometimes they refer to them as fronts in a battle, where there's a line of, or scrimmage in a game. And yeah, it's sort of like these all form lines of defensive, offensive positions to push through. So you could have, excuse me, you could have people right here, like sort of hiding behind this red line right here. And then you could have some people hiding over behind this red line right here. And you can see how these arrows, kind of like you mentioned, these arrows kind of go perpendicular across those red lines and they oppose each other. And when you're building your level, you want to think a lot about those opposing lines. They're sometimes referred to as like a threat vector. Yeah, so you also have some of these lines also refer to a direction. They could be a threat vector coming towards the player, or they could be a vector of attack for the player. Like say the player has pushed through this whole enemy area there. They say they started at the bottom, they push through this whole enemy area, and they're flushing out the last enemies back here. Then this could be their vector of attack, and they're pushing through these lines of cover right there to eliminate the enemies beyond. So these lines, they help illustrate all the sort of imaginary lines you imagine. They're sort of like lines. A good example is sort of like lines in sports games. There's a lot of that. There's lines in hockey. There's lines in soccer. And these lines sort of represent one side versus the other. The issue is that in an actual like sports game, those lines are very clear. They're played out. They don't tend to change so much. In American football, they do change. It's called the line of scrimmage, and it actually moves depending on each play in the game. But otherwise, when you're making a combat space, you have to imagine where those lines are at any given moment because it's very fluid. Things change a lot. The AI reacts to the player reacts to the AI. And you have to be aware when you're placing your cover that you've created a lot of good opposing pieces of cover that they allow a fight back and forth to feel like there's tactical options for both sides in the fight. This comes up, sometimes there are also mechanical concerns if you're doing this with AI, like for a single player or co-op game. If it's a multiplayer game, which we're not really going to get into that much, I've worked a lot on multiplayer maps in the past. They follow a lot of the same rules, but the mechanics might be a little bit different because the AI might need specific kind of measurements between say, cover objects or between, or cover density, say, between the AI and the space that all the cover is in. Another thing that brings me to another point, on some of the maps, I think, or a lot of them actually, and this probably happens every semester, a lot of people tend to place too much cover in their level. And it ends up being problematic. Like when you look at this level, you see a lot of cover here, but you're not really, by looking at it, you have to be aware of the scale of this map. There's no legend on this map telling us the scale of this. But if this, I would say if this were in our 40 by 40 meter map, I would say this seems a little bit like too much cover to me. Although it's hard to tell because, like I said, this is a bit abstract. So I hope that makes sense. The description of the red lines. If not, yeah, let me know. Okay. And you said also, do all maps have to have flank routes? It definitely helps. I feel like if you have a map that's just sort of scattered cover everywhere, the player needs to feel like there are clear paths, not like they're just running through a scattering of cover objects from cover to cover. They should feel like they have clear paths between different sort of different tactical options. Like there might be like a certain cluster of cover here, like say what was called the player territory here, and they might feel like they like the tactical options present by getting in this back corner here, using the concept of the backboard. Like say as a player, I go back there. You just add an arrow maybe. Yeah, so if we take this, ooh, this is chugging on my machine today. And so the player likes, say they like being in this corridor. Sorry, did I just say corridor? I meant they like being in this corner. And they like attacking from back here. Then, they travel up this flank route. They go back in this corner and they can attack the enemy from behind or maybe from the side if the enemy's also retreated. But it's nice that we sort of try to communicate these routes from like an area of tactical interest to another area of tactical interest. So I think they might not always be referred to as flank routes. Flanking seems to imply that you're getting to the side of the player, the side of the opposing force. But it might not necessarily be the case. The enemy might have like moved from their position here. They might have moved to another position somewhere else in the map, but you're just trying to move from your first attack area to your second attacking area. Right, okay, so I'm gonna look a little bit here on building this out. Actually, I'm gonna pull that image up again. So one thing that I found useful oftentimes, and I think this image might be cut off a little here. Yeah, I'm gonna go back and look for the original image. I think it got cropped a bit. Okay, sorry, here it is. Yeah, I'm not sure why that got cropped, but this idea of an entry valve and a preamble, a lot of times in games, with games that are shooter games, like first-person shooters, third-person action shooters like Uncharted, when they're trying to create a sense of progression, a lot of times they'll have these areas between combat spaces. They do this like in the Mass Effect games too, all the Call of Duty games. It's really pretty standard where you sort of travel through an area where there's no combat, and then you slowly introduce the player to a new sort of arena of fighting. I did this in the past on some single player shooters I worked on. Oftentimes in these sort of entry areas, there might be sort of a bit of narrative. You might be with some AI companions, they might be talking. your character might be talking to themselves. You tell a bit of the story, and then you suddenly come upon a dangerous area with enemies, and you have to push through it. This happened a lot in the Uncharted games, really. So it's good also not only for narrative reasons, but it's good to introduce the player slowly to the fight area. It's important a lot too. It kind of relates back to that idea of the node network, which I'll bring up yet again. I think it's under spatial organization. Yeah, it's also important in relation to this. Because a lot of times when we talked about building our node network and we talked about when the player enters a new space or from a previous node, say they enter this new space and this is a combat space, we should think a lot also about our composition as viewed from that initial entry into that combat area. It's very similar to what we did before with the districts and going all the way back to the assignment with the composition that we created to be viewed from only one angle. This is important also when the player enters the space, say their directive here on the green line. There's a focal element. This might be important for the combat as well. It might help it keep focused. This could be, excuse me, I'm going to take a drink of water. Okay. Yeah, this focal element could be, it could be a gameplay element. It could be like a goal to achieve. Maybe it's an area where you're supposed to capture. It could be an area of danger. This could be, if this were like a military shooter, this could be a tank, something that you can't bypass and you're forced to move your way around it. Or it could be a target to kill in combat. It could be that kind of thing. Or it could be just a door to reach to get through the level and move on. But anyway, when you enter the space, it's sort of like you'd be looking here, like this would sort of be your player entrance, your player directive as you enter the space right here. So from this view, maybe you do want a good view of across the dead zone where there's not a lot of cover. It's extra dangerous. To maybe the goal right here. Maybe you can actually see the goal really clearly across this cover. The way this legend tells us there's low cover and high cover. So it actually does look like when you move through the space here to the end of the preamble and turn and look across the combat zone, you're looking across lots of pieces of low cover. So conceivably you could see your goal in the distance. And if you create your composition in a good way, this can be your, this can be framed really nicely by the composition you make. So I'm going to work a little bit on that. And we can also use a little bit of height variation. These AI aren't the most, they're not the most complex AI for sure. They're pretty simple. So I'm going to keep that in mind as I'm building here. So let's see if we can kind of build out something like that space we just saw. Excuse me. I'm just going to take some of these objects here. Also, another tricky thing about these objects, sometimes if you don't grab the right part of it, you can end up moving. If I do it the wrong way. Yeah, if you grab like the wrong piece here, you can end up moving the scripted cover object away from the actual geometry. So you want to look out for that. Okay. So I'm going to do something. I'm going to change this up a little bit because in the image we had, let's see, the goal is there. I'm going to do something where I'm fighting more diagonally across the space. So I'm going to place the goal diagonally to where I'm entering the space. So I think I'm going to also put a little extra geometry in the level to accomplish that. Maybe I'll raise this up a little. I don't think I'll break anything if I duplicate this guy and move him around a little. Maybe I'll take like half of the level kind of, or nearly half the level, close to it. Half the width of the playable space. Whoops, I selected the wrong thing. Also, another interesting thing I want to bring up is a lot of times in games, there's sort of this back and forth between what to use for pieces of cover between the art team and the design team, at least in the AAA studios that I've worked in. And what goes on is there's a temptation to to place to make the cover out of objects that aren't part of the architecture of the level. They're part of the architecture of the structures that were built, like narratively speaking, in the level. They're more just like objects that were placed later. That's why I feel like sometimes the infamous crate is used a lot in shooter games. You even see it in the Uncharted games. In Uncharted 4, there were a lot of combat as you were trying to reach various archaeological sites. You came in conflict with the militia, and the militia that was trying to, or the private army or whatever that was trying to capture the same treasure you were. And what happened was you'd enter a space that they reached before you, and so you'd be in ruins. So the ruins would be, you know, how do I do this quickly to show what I mean? Say the ruins would be this building right here. But then there would be, how do I put it? There'd be objects that were placed there by the militia, and they were placed there. I mean, they told the story of saying like the militia set up a camp, they placed supplies in the camp, and now, oops, I'm just trying to select this. Oh no, this thing again. Sorry, the canvas is giving me problems. Goodbye, canvas. Yeah, so they do this thing where this would be kind of the structure, the ruins that used to be there. And let me move that a little bit more. Those would be the ruins. And then later on, the militia moved in, they put their supply crates there, and then suddenly, you know, they place the crates. They might do something like this for cover. And so suddenly the crates are, they look like they're scattered around the level and they were placed later, but it enables the designer to work with the art team and sort of justify why there are objects, you know, conveniently placed for combat, but maybe they have to make sense story wise. And then maybe like the player is supposed to push through that area, and then maybe they enter from a diagonal where they want to show there's two different routes. So they can now sort of either attack this way or they can now kind of go this way. So yeah, they do a lot of that. And so I bring this up because if you can find interesting ways to make your cover out of the actual level geometry first before you worry about placing just like abstract blocks of cover. I think that's a better way to work, if that makes sense. Like for instance, right back here, I'm going to try to build like the remains, or not the remains, but I'm going to try to build, how do I put this? Well, like, yeah, structure, I guess. And then when I place cover, I'm going to embellish it a little with some cover pieces of something that were built there later. But I'm not gonna build the whole level or too much of the level out of strictly just the abstract gameplay cover objects. So if we do this, like we take, say, this here, and we don't just place it out in the level like that, you know, like just kind of randomly things to like put your body against and shoot around. You know, like you have to ask yourself later, the art team will look at your abstract cover objects and they'll have to make them into real objects, and they'll say, you know, what the heck are these? They don't make any sense why they're there. So it's up to you as a level designer to think about how your space is in reality, and how it can work for a combat space. So let's say here, for example, and you have to like figure out how your gameplay metrics work. Like if you know how these cover objects work and how you have to snap to them, um, you should make it clear like what happens. Uh, you know, like, will this work here? Say I'm on this side of it, I'm standing up here. Ask yourself, will this work? Can I snap to cover on these objects like this? And can I also snap correctly when I'm down here on this level? So, I mean, you know, when you put those things in, you'll have to test. There'll always be, if you're in a cover shooter, there'll always be certain mechanical rules that the shooter has to obey. So let's see, like, I should be able to snap to this as low cover. But you can see, like, right now, I'm not standing up as if I was in full height cover. And that's because sorry, I, you know, I'm first binding to this low piece of cover, but this high cover, I'm sure if like, once I stand up on it, I'll snap to it properly once I'm on top of there. So let me see if I do that. And then I'll snap to this, but I don't snap to it properly there. So you have to think about things like that too when you're building your cover. You have to think like, does it make sense in the game world? Does it obey the game mechanics metrics, the way they're outlined? So for this, I might have to be a little trickier with it. Like now we have these overlapping bits here. So to make this work, I might have to build this out of pieces that are specifically, that will specifically work for the shape I'm trying to build, which is I'm trying to embed a pillar in the base of this foundation of a building here. So this is, what's the size of this cover? 3-meter cube. Oh, I'm sorry, I wanted 2-meter cube. And this, so we have our 2-meter cube, we can snap that in there, and then we want, I guess, a 2x1, which I think we have. Is it this one? Yeah, okay. And honestly, this, yeah, I mean, I guess I have my own basics cube here that I have. It's just geometry without the actual, you know, the actual scripted cover colliders on it. So I think this should work now. So now the player will actually stand up. Let's see. So you really do, suddenly you have to think about, like, I want to build a believable space. And I realize this level kept it really simple. It gave you, you know, it gave you these screen walls, which were more, they were set up more to look like, to be formulated as actual walls of varying widths, actual windows with a certain height to the bottom of it, doorway widths and heights, things like that. But if you want to build it yourself, you're going to have to, so now this is actually working, you're going to have to do a little bit of thinking beforehand about how the player will move everywhere in every, along every sort of vertex in the level. So I think here, if I want to make this taller, I have to do something like this. This is why grid snapping gets so important at some point. There, so now maybe I have that. Whoa, what did I do? Oh, okay. So now that I built out that little section there, I can kind of reproduce it a few times, I think. That's not bad. I think it's just like 5 meters. One of the things Amelia had mentioned in the lectures was 2 meters was a pretty good minimum to use when you're thinking about the clearance for the player to move through areas. I would agree. I found people, a lot of times they get a little overzealous with the cover, and like I said in some of the reviews, too many cover choices makes each one less valuable, less meaningful to the player. In addition, if it gets too bad, it can also lead to difficult movement through the level. So, okay, let's see. This could be interesting. Okay, so I found another problem. I thought I fixed a problem, but I did not. Okay, yeah, I actually got that wrong. This isn't going to work quite how I pictured. Because now, once we make this a full, well, yeah, I've actually introduced a new problem. We've now made this full height cover behind the pillar. So now we have to think about how does that work? So to make that work, we're going to need the full height cover pillar. We need kind of a combination. This is where it gets really difficult here. I guess we can move this up, can't we? Okay, you can actually, all right. So yeah, I do actually have to edit out. I have to do some very specific editing to this to make this work now, but it should work. Test it again. So now I still snap, whoops, I still snap to full height, climb up, and then this should be full height, and it is. Great. Okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make this an assaultable, like obviously an assaultable area. So I want this to work well for the AI. They need to have the proper kind of scripted cover objects and behavior to make this work as well, not just the player. Sometimes in games, another interesting thing that I've seen in different projects I've worked on with shooter games is they vary how they approach the creation, mechanically the creation of cover between the AI and between the player. This one uses the exact same scripted gameplay objects to handle snapping to cover and all that. But that works well because both the it's a third-person shooter, so you need to be able to see how the player snaps to cover. Many times in shooter games, if it's a first-person shooter, uh, there'll be different rules for the single-player character, the first-person single-player character rather, and the AI character. Because the AI character, you need to see them all the time, like what they're doing. You're looking at their bodies as they move and they fight. Where the first-person player character, you're not. So they'll actually create different different little objects like this that are made specifically for the AI, but not for the player. Like a first-person shooter, um, you likely wouldn't be snapping to cover. Although games like Deus Ex did a thing where the last two Deus Ex games did a thing where, and even I think, yeah, okay, those are two good examples. Where when you were in first-person mode, you'd approach a combat situation, then you'd toggle whatever buttons you had on the controller to snap to cover, and then it would suddenly pop your camera out and you were looking at your character in third person mode. And that's a few games do that. But in games I worked on, like the Homefront game or Bioshock Infinite, when you were the first person player character, we didn't have any like cover nodes, as they're often called, these invisible things in the world that make enemies snap to them. There wouldn't be cover nodes for the player, but there definitely would be cover nodes for the AI. So when they'd attack you, you'd see them go into cover, but it was because they were placed there by the level designer because they decided where they wanted the AI to take cover. And it gave you a little bit of flexibility, like say, for instance, as the player attacked AI up in this area here, maybe they only wanted the AI to take cover between like on this pillar or on this pillar. Maybe they didn't want them to ever take cover over here. They wanted them to sort of stick around here. So to do that, they might have like deleted these, like not allowed there to be cover objects for the AI to be attracted to over here. And it would sort of force them to fight over here. So there's a lot of different reasons. And those are more mechanical reasons. But they are actually level design reasons. When you're planning out your combat design, you want to think about how your AI are going to fight. These AI, we don't have a lot of tools to make them do a lot. The patrols with the waypoints. Let me turn on my navigation here, and I'll rebake this quickly. And I'll grab one of these guys. I realize I'm kind of rambling on this. I'm just sort of thinking of things as they occur to me because that's how I tend to operate a lot. I wasn't planning on talking about this, but I think it could be kind of interesting if you haven't done it before. So yeah, so this guy here, our only tool is, and actually this has a little bit to do with something Ryan had mentioned about the AI. We have the ability to add waypoints here with the AI. So if I grab him, and let's see, how does it get me started on adding waypoints? That's really strange. Today it's not, yesterday I couldn't get it to stop drawing waypoints, and today it's not drawing any waypoints at all. That's very curious. I'm not sure why that is. Let me delete these. Okay, now it's finally, for reasons, okay, that was, I think it got a little broken for a moment there. So yeah, so you can set up, say, a patrol, like say you want this guy to just patrol back and forth. Around this area here. I think that's it. I don't need to do any more than that. I'm just gonna grab something else so it stops doing that. Yeah, so that's how you make the, I mean, I think Amelia showed this in the lecture, but that's how you'd make their patrol path. But this is really only useful when, before they're alerted, when you look at the properties of the AI under the AI controller script, There's some behavior properties. The way they're set by default, pretty much given the size of these levels, they're not that big. They're 30 by 30 or 40 by 40. It means that these properties here translate into, as soon as they see you, they're going to go into high alert attack hostile mode. And they're probably not going to, it's not going to be easy to make them, I don't even know how you can make them return to a patrolling state at that point. One of the big reasons is there's this communication distance here, which appears to be, as soon as they catch sight of the player or are alerted to where the player is, they telepathically broadcast this over 12 meters in all directions around them in a radius. So what it means is if there's, let me go back over here. Excuse me. If there's all the AI here, and say this one AI over here catches sight of you way off here in this distance, you know, that information is going to telegraph and then telegraph and then telegraph and then telegraph, like from AI to AI, and suddenly they all know where you are. It's like they all share a hive mind. So if you wanted to play with this more, and we will be using these AI next week's assignment, and if you want to play with them more, you could try selecting all the enemies at once like this, and then you can edit the properties, do a kind of a bulk edit of the properties. You could play with these distances if you want, although I do warn you, it's very easy to make the AI act really dumb. That can be pretty difficult. Like if we get into, where is it again? Yeah, like if I suddenly, like they can see 20 meters away. If I suddenly break that down to like 4 meters, then they're incredibly nearsighted. If I break the communication distance down too much, suddenly it seems like they're really unaware of what their friends are doing. But you could, if you want, do some little tests yourself and play with these numbers and see what you think. Because the tricky thing about testing these combat layouts that you guys are doing is quickly the AI have a tendency to just want to rush you. And what that means is once they rush you, you know, they're kind of ignoring a lot of this. They don't really stay in a territory. In BioShock Infinite and also in Homefront, we had a way of spatially restricting the AI to a level. Like we could make it so that they would stay, you could make it so they would stay in this zone. They wouldn't leave, say, an invisible volume right here for a long time until maybe we put an invisible trigger volume across this red line, and when the player reaches this zone, you could make them retreat to a new zone in script. Like we'd actually do things like that, or maybe systemically, they stay in a zone that they're assigned to until the player gets within, you know, X meters of that zone. So yeah, that's just some things I wanted to say about the AI if you're having issues with them. Also, there were some levels where the nav mesh wasn't rebaked. So anytime you move, you have to remember that anytime you move your cover object like this, you have to rebake the nav mesh. Because now what happens is if you don't rebake it, you know, the enemy will try to, they think they see a nav mesh. They don't see these objects, they just see the nav mesh on the ground. Excuse me. They see this clear free path of green here, and they think, or blue-green, and they think they can run right through this object. But suddenly they'll run around this space on the ground where it used to be. So yeah, just make sure you rebake it. I'm gonna take another drink, hold on. Okay, so back to our little construction over here. I think I moved all these objects where they need to be. Yes, okay. Yeah, so I was gonna try to sort of maybe get the idea of a flank route going. So to do that, I'm gonna have to select, oh, these are all cover objects. Okay, that's bad on my part. We don't need cover objects for all of that. That's a lot of extra garbage we don't need. So instead, I'm going to fill this gap in with my, with my just basic block prototype, my cube. I don't know why that's selecting that. I don't know why sometimes you'll click on something and for no reason it'll select the object behind it. No idea. See, I'll just scale this way up. Of course, to the player, this will all look like one, one continuous bit of brown geometry, which is good. All right, so I guess I can just use a bunch of those twos. Will make my life a little easier, perhaps. Let me save this before it crashes. It's feeling a little crashy. Okay, so maybe, what else can we do here? Let's maybe make this edge more fortified. I'm going to try to create a, I'm sorry, I should tell you what I'm trying to do. I'm going to try to create a flank route here up onto the platform. So I'm going to try to make it more deadly from other vectors to try to encourage the player to find the safest zone. So I think we can actually, I think we can make this work. The problem is, yeah, the problem here is this is now, if we consider our full head cover to be 2 meters, this isn't quite 2 meters. So we're going to have to do a little bit of trickery here again. Or we stack this and make it 2 meters when you're standing on the platform. Although it can be over 2 meters, that's also okay, as long as it's at least 2 meters. But let's make it 2 meters, because we can. I can still grab this here, make that a full height piece of cover on this side. Yeah, okay. And then the same goes for this. We want that to be full height. And this to be full height. Okay, that actually works all right. Which means we can duplicate that and maybe yeah, okay, let's try that. That's kind of interesting. In fact, maybe we make this even more fortified for the enemy. Maybe the enemy can actually like completely have this area blocked. I think I want a 3 meter piece, right? I hate when that happens. Okay, that's better. Okay, so now we have that actually blocked in. In fact, I just got an idea. Maybe that's not the right way to do it. These notches are a little odd, but I think I'll just leave that for now. Yeah, that's okay. But it does mean Now this reads as full height cover, which makes our life a little more difficult again. So it's not snapping. There we go. Oh, okay. I guess my placement was a little off here. Not sure why. I thought I had that right. Okay, sorry, that's getting a little noodly there. Also, this guy is 2 meters, right? So why is... oh, I'm off. The whole thing's a little off, isn't it? Ugh, that's why. Slightly too big. And suddenly I can't snap, which is odd. My snapping just shut off when I selected that way. It's going a little slower than I was intending. All right. This is rotated weirdly. Lovely. Okay. Okay, that's something. It's not ideal, but it's something. So this becomes like a defensive position for them here. I'm going to cheat and move. Make that 3 meters wide. I'm probably going to also is that right? Okay. All right. Make that just 21. Make this 3. And we'll make this our final piece of cover over here. Actually, no, I don't want to make that cover. I'm sorry. I want to make this, this is going to be our little ramp. Turn off snapping so I can align this a little bit. Okay, so that's our ramp. So one thing that's worth pointing out if you have areas like this, you can see how, like, if I move over here, this is going to get weird really fast. Sorry, left my II in the world. But hey, he went to cover, so that's good. But he's not helping me otherwise. And we'll just delete his mesh so he doesn't fall off and give us headaches later. Sorry, delete his waypoints. All right, so let's see, where was I? Right. Just want to show you how you want to try to maintain consistent cover heights when you're building your geometry. Like, you have to think about how you have to tweak the geometry to make it work. Like right here, that works okay. If we're fighting them over here, suddenly this gets weird right here. See how I'm getting stuck on that? Like it thinks this is crouch head cover, but the ramp is pushing me higher than crouch head cover. So, I can get shot in the side of the head this way, and that's not what we want. So what you should probably do there is like you either have to go, you have two choices, crouch or full height cover. Um, and like in games, typically there's usually illustrations, diagrams sent out to the team by the game designers. So if they're designing cover mechanics, they'll send out pictures. I think, yeah, these are from the lecture also that Amelia had showed, where they try to illustrate very clearly the differences in cover pieces here. So like when they're saying to the level designers, to the level artists, when you're building things, don't be building things that the player can get behind in these red zones where it's like, it's not cover, or don't build things that are like slightly, they're above not cover, but they're also not low cover. Don't build them like between 0.5 and 0.1 meters, but, and then when they're high cover, don't build them between low cover and high cover. Like don't build them there. The player might not know like if their head can be shot over top of the cover. So that's kind of the thing we're trying to avoid here as well. So for this, I think what we have to do is we have to get a piece of, probably to make it easiest, a piece of full height cover. I'm not even sure if this will work. Let's see. I think this. Is my grid snap back on? Yeah, so I think this guy can probably go. Actually, I wonder what will happen if we do this. Let's find out. I'm curious. This is why you have to play with your mechanics and see how they work. So we probably snap to this first, right? Okay, that's no good either, as we can see. We're going to get our head shut off at some point. So with that in mind, I would say try that instead. I'll fill in the gap here. This might still be weird though. In fact, I think to make it more on the safe side, I'd probably also prefer to create an even more, more useful cover situation like this. That way, I feel like I have something to attack the enemy from when I come around the flank area. I should probably move my cowboy closer to this area, but all right, so let's see, we snap the cover. That's actually not so bad. And then we go down low. Yeah, so we see like we've had to make this big piece of geometry here so that we obey the rules of cover. Yeah, so I'm just trying to show you an example of how you might not be able to build any shape you want. You might have to build shapes that work very strictly with the game mechanics. The game I'm working on now, I can't discuss what it is yet, but there's a lot of special mechanics for a lot of special acrobatic moves and yeah, a lot of very specific moves. So we have all kinds of metrics to the player is able to climb all over things and jump over things and slide on things. And so it means like when you build out your spaces, there's very specific shapes, very specific like scale ratios you have to obey. All right, so yeah, back to what I was thinking earlier. So if we have the player enter the space from kind of a preamble, how can we do that? Let's say let's just say it's something like this. Okay, let's say maybe this isn't even really an option because maybe there's some really nasty kind of level geometry going on here that doesn't let you do what you want. Maybe this is kind of terrain or something. So this is an area where, say, you build in some natural features, but you have to try to differentiate them from, if you make them organic enough, they should differentiate uh, more from being, combat gameplay relevant to not. So I'm just trying to create some shapes that are like obviously not something you want to fight near. Oops. Yeah, so at least this way it's pretty clear, like, I don't want to be, like, going this way seems deadly to me. But say to yourself, what if you do want this to appear like a possibility of something the player could attack, a possible angle of attack? How could we do that? Well, if you want to do it again, you have to sort of build out your shapes so that they're much more clear. And suddenly you have to take these nice angles of maybe rock slopes or a cliff edge or something like that. And you have to make them much more substantial. It's kind of your only option. Oh, my snapping's off here. Okay. Yeah, you might have to do something like that where you have a really hard edge and it's kind of obvious that where you can stand and where you can't stand during combat. So at least here you have a place where you can clearly sort of settle in for an attack, and this is clearly an area where you can't slide along this or do any of your other kind of cover moves. So let's see, this is our preamble. How could we do this? Well, we could do some cover interaction. We could place some cover that kind of aligns to each other piece to sort of communicate that this is a path. Let me move this back a little. Oh, keep selecting the wrong pieces. Okay. So yeah, so here we have our threat vector toward the enemy outpost or whatever this is. And then off to the side, we start to communicate like a line. Actually, let me move this back a little. Yeah, over here we start to communicate a line along this edge. It makes the player want to move this way. And then, I mean, maybe we do something where maybe we make it obvious that this is an entrance. Maybe like I hit it a little too much. Entirely possible. Maybe this is a little dangerous because maybe there's no cover along part of this route maybe. But at least it now communicates that that's the way to get up there. Like maybe now you can see that. Okay, now you can actually see it. And maybe we articulate it a little bit with this, the way we did before. Now, of course, we have to kind of drag these down so the player reacts to them properly when they're on the ground. And actually, let's see, that's not quite right either. I guess we could move this one down into there. So yeah, I did that thing again where I didn't quite align stuff. But this is important, like honestly, you really do have to align things exactly so, or they just won't work the way you want them to. And then maybe, maybe we illustrate this even more. It depends, like some combat spaces, they get really, like really clear as to what's going on. So maybe like once you get over here, you articulate this edge even more by doing, let me snap this thing. You create a path around the edge of the level here. So now maybe it's even more clear that you can now like go around the perimeter of the map. This happens a lot of multiplayer maps. Really, for extra security, there was an infamous map back in one of the Call of Duties, maybe like I forget which one. It was a map set in sort of like a radioactive zone where there were just like wastelands and fields, and the whole map was like these wide open spaces with grassland that you could duck down into the grass not to be seen. But generally speaking, everybody who played the map, well, a lot of people played the map, especially snipers, they generally they just clung to the edges of the map and just like circumnavigated the whole map by sticking to the edge. So that, honestly, that could work here too. In fact, I'm not even going to use these because we don't need to stick to this wall back here. I'll make this the backboard of this side of the map. So that could become an interesting route. And then if the enemy, for some reason, maybe an enemy spots you and they push out along this edge and they come around to attack you here, then you want to think about, okay, how would that fight be then? How would you fight in that area then? You need to kind of ask yourself that. And then at some point, it might come down to, well, if I'm going to fight in that area, okay, I'll have some bigger pieces of cover like this. And now suddenly you have something you can like cluster up against and fight with. And then maybe you do a bit of staggering. This usually works well on kind of long straightaways where you have to push down a perceived corridor. So maybe you come there and then they come, let's see. Maybe they run across here and they try to fight you there. And meanwhile, you've taken a position here. And then maybe, yeah, to make that less dangerous. Actually, that is too dangerous. See, already I found like, if I fight someone in this direction, maybe you do want that though. Maybe you want this to be a bit of a dangerous path to take as well. So that if they attack you from this angle here, you can't defend against people shooting you from the side here. So maybe then you're forced to retreat a little back to there and first deal with the enemy in this direction and then come around and deal with the enemies in that direction. Kind of depends on what you want to do, how dangerous you want this path to be. If you wanted to make this path more safe, then you could do something like, what's a good example? Oops, I keep spinning that the wrong way. Okay. Then you can put your cover together like this, and suddenly it's not as dangerous because now we can defend. We can do two different kinds of fighting here. We can sneak up here. We can now shoot whatever's coming that way, and then we can, if we want to do more fighting here, we can fight things in that direction. Or if you want to make it even more, you could have kind of a middle ground, which is, of course, just duplicating. Where's my 2? Something like that. This could make it so you could take cover from 2 different directions, but it now makes it more deadly because as soon as you pop up to shoot here, you can now be shot from the side, and vice versa. If you shoot there, if you attack this direction, enemies trying to flank you can now shoot you from the side. Kind of depends what you want to, how dangerous you want it to be. And you have to think about those things as you say you have a series of combat spaces that you progress through, different combats. And some are, maybe they're actually supposed to be more difficult. You're creating a difficulty curve. Then things like the cover interactions and the cover density, the total amount of cover, they become more important. They kind of work as levers that you can, or dials that you can turn to tune your play experience to be more or less difficult. So yeah, so this is, we could go around here and flank this. This could become kind of the dead zone in the middle. And if we wanted to be really deadly, we don't put much cover there. In fact, one thing we could do is extra deadly. Say we don't want the player to push across there unless they're really, we want to put a few pieces of cover for players that really are daring. Then we could just go with some very scattered cover that's still very deadly. And it could be, oops, I wanted to duplicate this. Maybe we only put like 2 pieces of cover like that in the middle to make that seem like a player could run across there. But then maybe we do something like this. And I'll just move this a little. And yeah, there's something deadly over here. And now just for the sake of the blockout, we make it really clear that this is a tank. Oof. Now I'll just do this. Yeah, I guess that's fine. I don't need to play with that much. But yeah, so maybe you enter the space and there's a tank there and it's really deadly and you're really afraid to move forward. This is actually a little bit of what I did in the Homefront game. In fact, maybe we just want to make this like the protection, some more clear protection against the tank. Yeah, so you come in, you look here and you find like, well, I don't know, maybe I can push forward, maybe I shouldn't. The tank's really deadly. Maybe I have some explosives that could take out the tank, so I move there and then I fire it at close range. Maybe it's a special grenade that can disable the tank, like with an EMP or something, so then I can throw that at the tank from there and that could become a viable option. But say I don't, say I didn't get those goodies at this point in the game. Wow, that's really not great. It's gonna have to do, I guess. cowboy. So that's already not great. The tank could obviously murder me very quickly. We can see that, but we've kind of framed it anyway, which is kind of cool. Um, so to make it a little better, you know, we add a little bit more cover to this. And now at least we're protected. Now from here, we actually get this kind of cool view of the tank. And we can run back here. We can snap to cover. We can look at our options. We see the tank again. We say, maybe we're the kind of player that sees that one little cover option. And we say, hell no, not doing that. So then we go here. The tank's still shooting at us. Maybe we wait till it reloads. Then, you know, we run over here. The tank's still shooting, you know. And maybe, and this is interesting too, because maybe we do want to have combat where some enemies do try to come at you from this angle, but we don't want the tank to kill you in the middle of that. We just want you to stay in certain zones of cover. Like maybe this is a safe location from the tank, but you can still fight enemies, but you don't have low cover. So, you know, then we go in and we say, okay, we need some cover there to protect against whatever enemies there are flanking the player down this route. And it becomes a flank route for both sides almost. And maybe we go back to this, you know, we say, okay, that we do need, you play it a few times and you say, you know, that tank's murdering me. When I try to go down this alley, I don't like it. I want it to be safer. So, you know, so then we put in more cover like this. And suddenly it becomes much more useful to us. And now we're protected. The tank's trying to hit us, but it can't get us. It reloads, we go back here. It keeps firing, we do some more dodge rolls. We get stuck trying to navigate that, we get murdered. And then eventually we get up here. Maybe right here it can't, it can shoot at us, like it can kind of hit us, but then once we get here, it can't hit us anymore and we're safe. And then we kind of quickly get into here and now we're in combat with the AI over here. So yeah, that's just one scenario that could work. But yeah, I just wanted to try to sort of tackle to show you, I guess, how you can present all the important information to the player that you want in your combat space, and how there's a lot of parallels between the previous lessons where we looked at creating a composition, having focal elements, and how they work across either just straight up narrative and exploratory kind of level design, and they also work in combat level design. So I think I'm probably going to end there. It's about all I wanted to convey to you guys today. If you have any questions, you could post them now. You guys are pretty quiet today. I hope I answered all your questions, Satvik. I think I did, but maybe I didn't. Oh yeah, and I guess like what you mentioned before about not all covers support multiple front vectors. In that case, the player may be in trouble if the attack is from a different side. Is that fine? Yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to show down this flank route here away from the tank. It depends how dangerous you want to make it. You know, it's always that, like areas with a lot of cover are pretty safe. I always felt like for the most part, like the Mass Effect combat rooms were pretty safe. There was always a lot of cover wherever you went. My issue with those games was a lot of times their cover placement seemed really obligatory. It seemed like there were giant boxes originally. You could see it, like you could picture in your mind the original level design block out. But then once the artists went in, they made them like, I don't know, science fiction crates. Like they're science fiction boxes, but they didn't really look like I said, like they didn't look Like they didn't always look like, you know, a building like this where you could see it and say, oh, that's actually part of the building. And maybe this here is part of the landscape, this piece of cover. Maybe it's not really placed there. And then maybe here is ruins. Maybe this actually was a structure at one point, maybe. Maybe it had a roof on it even, you know? So you justify a little bit more like why you put the cover where you put the cover. I would try to do that whenever you can. So now it seems like you're actually like going through a building maybe. Maybe this was a city street originally, and these were it was a war zone, and now like this this was a I don't know, this was a convenience store, and now it's like all destroyed, and you're just going through the ruins of it while evading a tank. You know, just like you have to try to like you have to oftentimes try to think about a narrative or a story, an environmental narrative kind of justification behind what you're building. Okay, I guess there's no other questions, so I'm gonna say goodbye for today. Thanks for joining me, and there's a couple reviews I have left. I'll be finishing them up today. So thanks a lot. Bye, guys.